Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Kinshuk. Welcome to Lehmannfest, and also the first sort of academic session here, which is on customer management. So as you can see, there is this Don's photograph with his book, and that was taken yesterday by me. And after a lot of coaxing, I have to say. And we have a great set of people talking about customer management today. If you remember the list that Jacob just put up of the top 10 people, Russ Weiner was, so Don obviously was there, right? Russ was there. So Russ, may I ask you to please come up and take a seat here? So Russ was in the top 10. Sunil was in the top 10 also. Is Sunil here? Yeah. Okay. Oh, he's just, I think, uploading his slides. So whenever, please come up over here. And then we have Carl, and I think Carl was not in the list only because that data was 2004, and Carl is very young, right? So, I'm sure in. So we have it's a really great session that we have, and let me take a few minutes just to sort of set it up and just to you know. Introduce the people. Is there a clicker here? Okay, there. Okay, so again, a lot of this was done yesterday, and in true Don style, like, why do you need, why do you need a definition? The name says it all. You don't really need me to. But then I'm like, no, please, like, it would be good to have one, and so. So, so Don gave me this definition, right? So this is what we'll go with: set of processes by which a firm establishes, maintains, and profits from relationships with current and potential customers. So that's what we're really going to talk about in this session. Okay, so in a modern era, customer management, I would say, has been shaped very heavily by Don's thoughts and his contributions. And let me just, and the three speakers will talk at length about all of this, but let me just highlight two very important pieces of contribution. So first was this paper that came out in 2004, which was Valuing Customers. I think a lot of you would know about it, and I think the speakers are going to talk about it. And then sort of an associated book, which was titled Managing Customers, which is the book that Don was holding in that photograph on the front page. And both of these things were with Sunil. So today, the plan is that Russ, Sunil, and Carl will walk you through the past, present, and future, the expected future of customer management as practiced by practitioners and studied by marketing academics. So that's sort of the idea of the session. So let me introduce Russ. Really, none of these three need any introduction, but nevertheless, so Russ is at NYU. He's the William H. Joyce Professor of Marketing. He has authored over 80 papers in marketing. He's written 3 books in that, and has co-edited the History of Marketing Science. He has served 2 terms as editor of JMR and has been involved in various positions with lots of other journals. He was the past executive director of Marketing Science Institute. He was a founding fellow of Informs, Society for Marketing Science, ISMS, and the AMA. And he was the 2011 recipient of the AMA Distinguished Marketing Educator Award. And then he has been on the faculties of Columbia, of Vanderbilt, and Berkeley. So there is definitely a Columbia connection. And if you've forgotten what Russ looks like, this photograph should remind you. So this, I have to say, I have taken from the internet with Russ's permission. So anything on here is all public sources. Right. Second is Sunil, and he'll talk about the present, so bring us up to today. He's at Harvard, the Edward W. Carter Professor of Business Administration. He has a recent book called Driving Digital Strategy, A Guide to Reimagining Your Business. Obviously, he was the author of the book that I showed you earlier, The Managing Customers as Investments. He has over 100 articles, book chapters, cases and notes in marketing, numerous best paper awards, frequently appears in the media, advises and speaks to companies. And prior to joining Harvard, he was also at on the Columbia faculty, and he also has his PhD from here. So what sort of photograph do you think I'll put up for Sunil? I thought let me bring a photo from his times at Columbia, and before he went to Harvard and took the guru look. This is what he looks like. Okay. Then we have Carl, of course, and Carl is a Duke. He's the T. Austin Finch Foundation Professor of Marketing. He's also the executive director right now of the Marketing Science Institute. His articles have appeared in all sorts of journals that you can think of. He has received or been a finalist for 35 Best Paper Awards, which I think is an amazing number. And all the big awards that you've sort of heard of, and many of you have won. He has won those too. So Carl has again been involved with lots of journals in various capacities, and also proud to say once again that he also has a PhD from Columbia. So all three people have a very deep Columbia connection. Okay, so for Carl, I have actually a video. Could you please click on the video? And this is again all from the internet, and he's gonna perform some So, all right. Okay. So before I hand it over to our three speakers today, one thing that really fascinates me about Don is almost unbelievable is that not only has been at Columbia for 50 years, he's been in the same office for 50 years, right? And this is again yesterday's picture from the office. So this is what it looks like, and you can see over the years he's collected a lot of stuff. He has. Obviously the office is sort of bursting at the seams. So my question for you is, do you think that to store his things, you have to say yes or no, has Don rented shelves in colleagues' offices at Columbia? So who thinks he might have done that? A few people, actually. So the answer is no, but yeah, actually, yeah. So there's a story behind that. So he did enter into a negotiation with me once about renting shelves in my. So this is what my office looks like, right? It's like basically nothing there, and Don did we entered into a negotiation at one point of time about him renting shelves in my office. And we were, basically almost struck a deal. But then Bernd Schmidt walked by and he's like, "What are you guys doing?" And we told him the story, and he's like, "No. You should never do that." And like, "Why should we never do that?" He said, "Because Don's office and Kinshuk, your office together, they serve as an art installation." Like, how does that? So because Don's office tells you about how it was way back, and my office tells you about the digital age. So we kept our offices as art installations, and Don does not have any books and other stuff in my office. But I thought that. So okay. So again, finally, before I hand it over, let me just say that being here today is a very special opportunity for me. And let me connect that with my story. So I did my PhD at Wharton, where I actually started in operations management, not in marketing. But then I ended up finishing it in marketing, at least informally. So how did this happen? Actually, what happened was that midway through my PhD, I was motivated by a marketing class that Pete Fader offers, and it's a very popular class at Wharton. I think many of you might know about it, called Applied Probability Models in Marketing. And I really got interested in that. And then as I got more interested in marketing, one of the first papers that Pete gave me to read was the Valuing Customers paper of Don. And I really enjoyed reading that paper. I thought it was really cool stuff. I thought I would like to do something in that, and I have a little bit of work in that stream. And now I'm also teaching an elective at Columbia titled Customer Management. So indeed, Don's work and his thoughts, they've truly had a great influence on me, at least through this, before even I came to Columbia, and definitely on my professional life's path. And I am very, very honored that I get to be the MC for this session. So with that, let me hand it over to Russ, and then we'll have Sunil, and then Carl.
Okay. All right, thanks, Kinshuk. I can't resist a couple of comments. You know, in the Olympics, say ice skaters, they're rated on the quality of the performance and difficulty of the routine. And Carl, I don't know, the performance was spot on, right? But the difficulty of that, as you all, probably doesn't get high marks, right? Maybe, and looking at Don's office, that photo, you know, where was the three-dimensional perceptual map, right? With the styrofoam balls sticking up? Does anybody remember that? Where is it? Where's Don? There's Don. Is that gone? Where's that now? It's been recycled. Oh, that's too bad. Okay. But those of you that hung out in Don's office a while ago know about that. Before I get started, let me just make a few comments. As Kinshuk showed, I started my career at Columbia, and I have to say, you know, in all seriousness, it was a great place for me to start. I was 26 years old in 1977 when I had to teach the MBAs who were about 27 and 28 and had some work experience. And fortunately, I had a fantastic group of colleagues, the three Dons, sounds like Godfather 4, right? Lehman, Morrison, and Sexton, the two Johns, Farley and Howard, the one Morris, all right, sitting in front, Mac Hulbert, number of other really great people interacted with. Noel was on the faculty at the time. And a couple of colleagues I started with, Mike Ryan and Bill Moore. And then a revolving door, as Columbia has been known for over the years, of other colleagues, some of whom are in the room. Joel, who's a colleague again at NYU, Rashi Glazer, Donna over here, and a large number of other people that I really benefited from. And so I think been at a few places, but certainly gratified that I started at Columbia. It was a great place for me. Enjoyed it, and still remember my time there very fondly, and hanging out in Don's office a lot. All right, so I was asked to do sort of the history of customer management. A lot of my family feels I live in the past, and I guess it's only appropriate that I live in the past for a few minutes here for this particular topic. Let me give a shout out to my colleague Scott Neslin in the back. Scott and I co-edited the book a few years ago on the history of marketing science, and I leaned a bit on his chapter to at least get some ideas for this talk, because Scott had a chapter. If you want a lot more on the history and development of the field, take a look at that chapter in our book. That's not, okay, yeah. So there's a great article, if you're interested in the history of this area, that in this paper by Petrison, Blattberg, and John Dayton, who's here in the Journal of Direct Marketing, and it talks about how catalog companies such as Montgomery Ward and Sears obviously started the mail order business. This was in the 1800s, and started keeping lists of their customers. And in the early 1900s, they started analyzing their customers, and they developed this rule. They called it the 12-month prune rule, that if you hadn't bought from them within the last 12 months, you were pruned from the list. So the idea of, I think, customer management and analyzing customer databases and lists is actually quite old. And actually, the RFM model is quite old. Again, from this historical article, company, the Arden Catalog Company, started using the RFM model in the 1920s, and that's something that we still talk about in many of our classes. In the 60s and the 70s, of course, the computer era began. U.S. Census and zip code data allowed companies to do a lot better targeting of their customers. Actually, the concept of lifetime value first appeared in the 1960s, the end of the 1960s. Reader's Digest was one of the early companies in terms of direct marketing to do this kind of analysis for targeting their database. And as some of you know, done multivariate analyses for a long time. Regression was used at the beginning, and then some of these methods like AID, CHADE, which is chi-squared, AID, discriminant analysis, et cetera, SPSS and other software started to be released, which gave these companies a much better capability of doing this kind of list analysis. Now, in the 1980s, then, we started to get IBM's mainframe databases. The term database marketing actually was first introduced. And, of course, the airlines started their frequent flyer programs, had these huge databases. It started analyzing them, but needed these sort of big databases that were created, the software, the hardware that was developed to analyze them. Now, one interesting question is, where do we keep all the data? Some of you might remember some of these storage media, if you go way back. I don't know if anybody, the younger ones, have ever seen paper tape before, but it existed. Many of you probably never saw an 80-hole punch card, but if you have, you probably never want to see one again in your life, right? Right? 9-track tape, right? How many of you used data sets on 9-track tape? If you did, you probably remembered the rule, no ring, no write. Does anybody remember that, right? If you want to write on it, right, you had to have a ring in it called a data protection ring. I can still remember here at Columbia back in the late 70s, you didn't have any kind of hardware in your office. There was a central room where you sat down at, I think it was called a teletype machine or something like that. I can't remember what it was called. And you'd give an order for the guy in the computer room to mount your tape, okay? So you'd sit there, you'd write down, please mount this tape. You'd say whether you wanted to ring in or ring out, depending on whether you're just reading or whether you're going to write on it. And sure enough, sort of in real time, you got a message back, your tape is mounted, okay? And go. Of course, you had your cards punched and read in the reader, and you might have remembered something called JCL, or job control language, that had some commands, //, something else, to make your job run. And so, those were the days where you actually had to store your data on these, external physical media. Then, of course, you had cassette tapes, and we had now a little more advanced hard drives, like I have down in the lower right-hand corner. And now the amount of information you can get on, I think I have one in my pocket, right? One of these things, right? A flash drive. It's pretty amazing. So, all the data that was being collected for these customer management systems had to be stored somewhere. But it wasn't really until the 1980s where we had these big databases that really enabled the storage of this very efficiently. And the idea of the relational database was to allow companies to merge data from different sources, and made it a lot easier to analyze data and do the kind of targeting that is customary now in customer management. So when we get to the 1990s, and I'm only going to go through about 2000, the way we've kind of divvied this up. You might remember these books by Peppers and Rogers, this one-to-one marketing idea that they had. And they had a number of books on it. And they, as I have up here, they introduced this concept of share of customer. So one customer at a time, as many products as possible over the lifetime of that customer's relationship with the company. There's this book came out in '96 called The Loyalty Effect by Frederick Reichheld. I think he was a McKinsey consultant at the time. I don't know if you've seen this. I still use this in class. I don't know if any of you use this chart in class, even though it's about 20 years old, looking at the impact of a 5 percentage point in increase in retention rate on customer net present value. This was from the book. Most of the examples, I think they're all services, but I think it makes a really good point, not only to us, but to students, about the importance of customer retention and loyalty. And that was, again, from Reichheld's book in mid-90s, 1996, which, again, made the point about the importance of retention and loyalty. And then there were some articles written about the idea of customer data, customer databases, as information to be managed like an asset. And Bob Blattberg and my former colleague at two places, Rashi Glazer and John Dayton, sitting out here in the audience. I'm sorry, I'll get to John in a minute. Blattberg, Glazer, and John Little, the other John, or another John, the marketing information revolution, developed this idea. Actually, it's a co-edited book. It's got a lot of articles in it. They're really interesting. And they developed this information value chain. They talked about expert systems and AI back again in 1994. So, you know, a lot of the stuff you're seeing today is not brand new, okay? They didn't do any data analysis there, but the concepts of using AI, you know, machine learning, deep learning, the things we're seeing today, certainly started some time ago. And many of you know AI has been around for many years, actually, the concept of AI. But, of course, today with the tremendous amount of computing power we have, you can actually make the reality of analyzing huge amounts of information. So they talked about this, this flow of data collection to data management to interpretation, where it's really information. And in fact, a number of papers in the 90s, really, Rashi was really kind of a thinker really ahead of his time. He really looked at data as information and as an asset to be managed by companies. And he had a number of papers valuing information, valuing that data, showing how a company can gain competitive advantage from that information that they have. So there were a number of papers there, again, in the 90s related to that. And then John Dayton came in with Bob Blackberg, the idea of customer equity. They had an HBR article in 1996 where they defined customer equity, and you can read that up there. And really interesting article. If those of you who have read it know, it talks about allocating resources across acquisition and retention. And actually a pretty analytical article for HBR, but quite valuable article in terms of getting people to think at that time. Again, a lot more about customer management in terms of, and making a distinction between acquisition and retention. And then Roland, Valerie Zeithamel, and Kay Lemon. Kay's here, I know somewhere. Kay's over there, yeah. Roland and Kay and Valerie had this book on driving customer equity. Picked up on that idea where they broke equity into three components: value, brand, and retention equity. So they kind of extended the concept. Bob Blackberg and a couple authors had a book on customer equity about the same time, where they looked at something called the customer life cycle, managing a portfolio of customers. So there was a great deal of conceptual advancement made towards the idea or concept of customer management in the 90s through just at the turn of the century. And then in terms of analysis, a lot of interesting papers were published in what was then called the Journal of Direct Marketing, now called the Journal of Interactive Marketing. Dave Schmidtlein, Morrison, and Colombo. Don Morrison, this was in Management Science. Some of you might have read that paper about counting customers, trying to determine from customer data, try to estimate those that are still active. A number of papers on lifetime value. Bob Dwyer's paper, going back to '89. Berger and Nasser's paper in 1998, also in the Journal of Direct Marketing. Vital Rao and Joel had this paper, Journal of Direct Marketing, to whom the mail, how many times if they don't respond. And another paper from the Journal of Direct Marketing using CART, AID, and CHAID. So there were a lot of methodological advancements made during that period as well. So this kind of takes us up to about 2000. Again, the basic ideas, like many of our ideas in marketing, aren't new, right? As I showed you, go back to the early 20th century in terms of our RFM, looking at data. Of course, we have considerably better tools than they had back then to analyze the data. But still, the idea in managers' heads about managing customers and trying to target them, think about what makes them unique and trying to maximize profitability has been around for some time. And I hope this gave you a little bit of an idea of the evolution of the idea through about 2000. So, oh, sorry. I should have looked at my slides before I did this, right? A few other, I'm sorry, I just got done teaching yesterday, so I had celebration last night for that. You saw that picture of me before, right? That was me after my class ended. Bolton Wanspeak from Marketing Science, Zahavi and Levin, Journal of Direct Marketing, Ganul and Shi, Management Science. Again, more kind of accomplishments in the area of analysis. And what I did was, after taking a look at that, again, seeing all the work that had been done, I took a look at all the work that had been done some time ago, and I developed this idea for a framework for customer relationship management, and looked at basically a fairly simple model from creating a database to analyzing it, selecting customers, et cetera. And this was published in the California Management Review around 2001. And actually, it's been my highest cited paper, which surprised me a lot. I don't know if, I guess somebody must be reading some of these things out there about customer management, and even in the California Management Review, which isn't considered to be a top journal. So certainly, as I said, a lot of progress has been made on customer management, a little bit of a historical background. And I guess I'll turn it over. Where's Sunil? Sunil? Oh, way in the back, okay. Sunil without hair. We saw Sunil with hair before. So I guess it's your turn, right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Where is Don? Don, great to see you. Chris, great to see you as well. Kinshuk showed you the Columbia picture. Now you see the Harvard picture. So now you know what Harvard does to you. But Don has, I have Lehman #1, as Jacob said, in terms of the network. I was not only his PhD student, but also had the privilege to be his colleague for 16 years. And great to see all the friends here. And among other things, Don excited me about research right from day one. I remember when I joined Columbia as a faculty, I was doing some paper with Don, and I was so excited about that. When I went home, I was just in a monologue with my wife about the research I was doing. It so happened that time we just had our son was born 3 months ago, and it was 7 o'clock in the evening, and he was crying like crazy, and my wife was trying to sort of calm him down, put him to sleep. I couldn't care less. I was excited about my research. And she couldn't care less about my research. So after about 30 seconds or so, my son went off to sleep. So she looks at me and says, finally, we got some value out of research. So that's, I'll have a few more things to say about Don, and because I know I can't wait till the evening for his roasting and toasting. But my journey with Don in this area started with actually teaching. And Don and I were both teaching the core marketing course. And our core marketing course at Columbia was not doing very well because a lot of people, MBA students at Columbia, want to go into finance, and they couldn't care less about the 4 Ps or P&G or the things that we were teaching. So we were struggling as to what to do, and one day the two of us sat down and says, we're going to change the course and flip it around. Rather than talking about 4 Ps, we'll talk about 2 key assets that the companies have that are not on the balance sheet, which are brands and customers. And then we flip it around and says, if you believe, because ultimately for valuation, that's important, which our MBA students wanted. And if that's important, let's figure out how to manage those 2 key assets, the customers and brands. So we sort of came back to the 4 Ps later in the course rather than at the beginning of the course. And the way we thought about that, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of how my journey with Don started in this. We started with this 2x2, and now I learned at Harvard everything can be solved by 2x2. So this whole notion is there are 2 dimensions. One is how do you provide value to the customer? This is what typically we talk about in marketing. How do we make customers happy and satisfied? And the other is how do you capture value from the customers, how the money comes home. So the horizontal axis is what marketing cares about. The vertical axis is what finance cares about. So this is one way to think about finance and marketing meet together, and that was very popular with the students because they could see the value of marketing to some extent. So obviously, the ideal thing is to be the top right-hand box where customers love you and you love the customers. And then we start struggling with the other 3 boxes. What happens in the lower left-hand box? The customers hate you and you hate them. So this is a perfect relationship to either move them up or you get rid of them. Of course, in the right-hand box, lower right-hand box, is customers love you, but you don't love them because you're giving too much money on the table. So that became our free riders, if you will. You try to move them up. And on the top left-hand box are the customers from where you capture a lot of value. Maybe they are hostages, but they basically hate you. So your Comcast cable company might be in that box. So that's how we started. But then became the question, okay, we know the horizontal axis, we spend a lot of time doing research on customer satisfaction and so on and so forth. But what about on the vertical axis? And as Russ told you, there's a lot of work already done in that area, and I was also very much influenced by Reichel's work. So Don and I actually started looking at how do we simplify this notion for the MBA purpose. That's how our journey started. So we basically came up with this simple, you can show up with a simple geometric series in the math, that customer lifetime value basically converts into what we call margin multiple multiplied by the average margin that they get. And we use the term margin multiple simply because the MBA students are used to PE multiples, right? And in this case, we basically pick the R is your retention rate, I is your discount rate, which comes from finance, the cost of capital, based on your debt equity structure. And if you look at this on the columns, you have the typical discount rate that the companies have. Obviously, if you're a risky company, your discount rate is higher. If you're a less risky company, the discount rate is lower. And on the rows are the retention rates, which are typical retention rate from 60 to 90%. So what we ended up, Don and I ended up telling the students is that, look, if you look at, for example, the highlighted column, the 12% discount rate, if your retention rate is 60%, your discount rate, your lifetime value is 1.15 times the average margin. You don't have to do mathematical complexity. You don't have to do long calculations. Or in other words, if your retention rate is 90% and your discount rate is 12, your lifetime value is 4 times the margin. So if your average margin per year is $100, the entire lifetime value of a customer is $400. It could be 410, it could be 390, but it's not 4,000. So that's a back of the envelope calculation to do. Another thing we told them is that, look, if you go across the columns from 10% to 16%, which is what the finance guys do, figure out the best debt equity structure, the multiple doesn't change much. But if you go down the rows, multiple change dramatically. So this was our way of saying, I'm more important than the finance guys. So this is how we try to convince the students that marketing was more important than what they were learning in finance. And then, of course, one of the bold claims that Don and I made in the class, that, look, and this is the time at the dot-com bubble, and I said, look, your finance guys couldn't value Amazon or couldn't value the dot-com companies because you can't do PE multiple. There's no E. You can't do discounted cash flow. There's no cash flow. And the claim we made is we can value companies because if we can value one customer, we can value the entire firm. Now, the MBA students being what they are, they say, prove it. So Don said, that's easy. You just add up the customers. And we had the concept of customer equity from some of the books, but we said, let's just do this. So this was a paper that came out in JMR, which we call Valuing Customers, to value the customers based on the customer database, both the current customers as well as the future customers. And of course, some companies we did well, some companies we didn't. And then the whole research in this area started, and this was a very simple way of looking at it. The marketing programs affect the 3 components of customer profitability, which is the acquisition, retention, and expansion, and customer profitability in turn affects firm value. And if you look at the research done in this area, at least in our view, lots of papers have come into each box. So for example, in the customer profitability and the definition itself, Russ told you about Schmidtline, Morrison, and Colombo paper that was talking about retention itself is sometimes hard to define in the so-called non-contractual settings. So if you're an Amazon customer, you don't call Amazon to stop buying from Amazon. So how do you know whether the customer is still alive or not? That was Schmidtline paper. Fader and Hardy said, well, heterogeneity in retention is important because there's a selection process. If you track the customers who are less loyal will basically go away. So your retention will look like, on average, going up, but really nothing has changed. It's the heterogeneity, not the dynamics of retention that is going on. And of course, lots of other papers going in that same direction. There are also papers in firm value, right from some people extended the paper that Don and I started. There is also a more recent paper. I don't know why Fader is a lowercase there, but he's as important as the other guys. He's probably more important. But McCarthy, Fader, and Hardy have a more recent paper improving that paper, the whole idea even further. And again, same things done in acquisition area. Asim and Carl had a paper on e-customization. Mike here with his PhD student talk about the word of mouth effect. And there is also a more recent paper by Fader again. In retention, Ava right here has done talking about the how do you actually target the people, and this, the managing the high-risk customers may not be always the best thing in terms of how they actually respond to the promotions or respond to the activity is perhaps more important. And same thing in what we're calling customer expansion. This is cross-selling. So again, this is a very brief view of a lot of research done in each of these boxes, connecting these different boxes and so on and so forth. What happened next? In fact, we were also concerned about it. Lots of other people were concerned about it. Because if you look at this picture, one of the things that jumped at us, at least, was this, that our estimate of eBay was very different than market estimates of eBay. So Don and I then ended up talking. They said there is only two possibilities. Either we are wrong or the market is wrong. We were not quite sure the market is wrong, so we were wondering as to how do we actually explain this? And it dawned on to us, no pun intended, is that the reason why this is the case is the network effects. Because in eBay is really a two-sided platform. You have buyers and you have sellers. Same thing with Monster. You have job seekers and you have the employers. And if the more job seekers you get, more employees you get. Similarly for eBay, the more sellers you get, more buyers you get. And in eBay case, for example, eBay gets all its money through commissions from sellers. It doesn't get anything from buyers. So the question is, how do you value the buyer? Because buyer is free. But you need the buyer in order to get the seller. And that became a question of what is the value of a quote-unquote a free customer. Buyer is a free customer, but obviously they provide the value through the indirect value through the network effects. This was, VK and others published a paper in HBR through a survey to show that what they call the tangible value, the customer lifetime value versus the customer referral value, both are important because some customers may not provide you direct value, but they provide value indirectly through the network effects, if you will, through word of mouth, et cetera. So they're trying to put a number onto it. There are lots of other papers who are trying to do the same thing. What is the value of the free customer as well as the social contagion effect. And I think this is an area that is still ripe for a lot of research to sort of say, can we quantify and link some of the stuff that Jacob also talked about in his talk. So I thought I will end by 10 things I learned from Don, because, I mean, Don, yes, you know you don't want to talk about you, but what the hell? I have the microphone. And I had the privilege of being with Don next to his office for 19 years, so I know a little quirks of Don, and I think you guys also know a lot of things about Don. So first thing that I learned is, yes, you can actually work, my spellings are wrong, you can work on 27 things, and that's actually very typical of Don also, spellings don't matter, is the idea. That you can work on 27 things at the same time. And the story behind this was at one time I was in Don's office and he was holding his head and he's saying, I got 7 rejections in the last 7 days. And I sort of paused and I said, Don, you have to have submitted 7 papers in the first place. I don't even have 7 papers to submit. So then I asked him, how many papers are you working on right now? Of course, he didn't remember. So we started counting and it turned out it was 27 papers. And of course, he didn't remember. So yes, you can work on 27 papers. The other thing that I also learned from him is, no, there is no excuse not to read and get feedback on a paper within 24 hours. Anytime I gave him a paper, whether during the doctoral days or later, no matter how busy he was, it'll turn around. And that was not only for me, for everybody who gave him the paper. And now I follow the same rule with my students, because if they put in so much work into this, there is no excuse not to give them the feedback so quickly. Yes, you can do everything with OLS, and if you can't, it's probably not worth doing. I remember as a doctoral student, I was taking a course on I'm now even forgetting, the Euroscog stuff. What is it called? Literal stuff, causal model, right? So, and it was very complicated stuff, and I was telling Don what I was learning, and he says, yeah, of course it can be done by OLS. So we ended up writing a paper, we sent it to JMR. The first round of reviewer says, you guys are smoking, this can't be done. I mean, the causal modeling is pretty complex. Then we explained it to them, and the second round reviews came back, the same reviewer said, of course, it's obvious. So, so we didn't know what to say. So I guess Don is right in that sense. And the other thing I learned is perfection is not a virtue. Finishing a paper is. And it says there is always improvement you can make. But as a doctoral student, I was looking for dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. And he said, long time ago, value of a finished paper is far more than the value of an unfinished paper. And I think that's the problem that all of us face for a long time. Another lesson is literature review is not actually a good thing because it kills creativity. And knowing a little bit about the background is good, but if you read too much it just constrains your thinking. First imperfect paper is better than the nth perfect paper. So Don is one of those guys who writes the first paper in a field and moves on. It's not a virtue of him to go to the nth detail of rigorous analysis. When I was in the job market many years ago, many of you now receive the job market letters. There were 7 of us going into the job at the same time from Columbia at that time, and Fareena is also there. All 7 of us got a letter from Don on the same sheet of paper. I got 4 lines. I was very happy. So that was his level of saying good things about you. And if you get 4 lines from Don, that's more than plenty. In fact, when I was moving from UCLA, I was thinking of moving from UCLA to Columbia. And I said to Don, you know me as a doctoral student. Should I move from UCLA to Columbia? His response was, well, UCLA is a good school. Columbia is a good school. There's a cost of moving. It's up to you. I said, Don, do you really want me at Columbia or not? If I hadn't known him, I probably would have stayed at UCLA. But he's also very practical. When we bought our first house here in Scarsdale, a lot of people came to our house with the housewarming gifts, with candle stands and potting plants and all cushion covers and everything else. Don and Chris came and gave us a crowbar and a ladder. And I still have those, Don. I call Don whenever I need to use it. And as you know, if Don were not a professor, he probably will be a handyman. But he's also very generous. He's probably one of the most generous person, and I think he's also one of the most humble person. So those are the other things I learned from Don. So Don, thank you very much for all that you've done for the profession and for me.
Thanks for organizing this. Columbia, thanks, Don, for admitting me into the PhD program. It's quite true. None of the work I've done in this field would have been done if Don hadn't admitted me into the program. After, others, Sunil, rejected me from their respective programs. So I was asked, to talk about customer management in the future. And I'm thinking about this, and I think as Gita explained, it's supposed to be a prospective, retrospective, or retrospective I don't even know how to pronounce this or what it means. All I know is that it's impossible, right? Who can foresee and who can foretell the future, right? That's just insane. It's not me. It's not what I do. I'm an empiricist. I'm grounded in facts, not the things I make up. So here we are, Scrooge, right? Goes to the Christmas future. And I'm asking, can you even predict the future? And so let's go back to roughly the time that Don started, I think was 69, so Star Trek ran 66, 69. Can predictions come true? Well, there's Bluetooth, right? Or his earpiece, Siri. Cell phones. It's actually remarkable when you start thinking about Google Translate, sliding doors, VR in the holodeck. Okay, well maybe that's a stretch here. Amazon Prime, and even this was foreseen. Okay, that's all very well for Star Trek, but what about in marketing? And so one of the nice things about being up in Cambridge is they've got this room full of dusty old manuscripts, and I was rooting around back there, and I see this monograph written back in 1997 called The Futures of Marketing By the way, this is the Wayback Machine picture of Don in 2007. I don't know about you. I don't see any difference. It's just remarkable. At any rate, what did Don say is the futures of marketing in 1997? Well, linking the customer to long-term profits came true. The use of specialized existing databases came true. Flip-flop of position of managers and academics, very much becoming true. Data mining and machine learning. Literally, if you go back and read, this is what he listed. Man versus machine. The internet, specifically talked about omnichannel. He didn't use that word, but the equivalent, and social media, and the rise of global markets. So he's spot on. And I thought, you know, as I talk about sort of the future in customer management, why make up something new? Given this is still developing, I'm just going to use Don's organization and take it from there and see if there's anything still to think about. And you know, Sunil teed up this, and Russ, very nicely about linking customers to long-term profits. And Sunil mentioned in the MBA classroom how indispensable this is for setting up the discussion with the finance majors. But I'm really excited. Yeah, I learned, Sunil's my advisor, so you can see I learned how to spell from him. But I do capitalization better. But anyway, McCarthy et al. Is this absolutely remarkable. I teach a Blue Apron case. It has literally gotten to the point where Dan's notes move markets. So he knocked off $1 billion off of the Blue Apron market cap and $800 million off of Wayfair through his customer retention analysis. And so, you know, the bottom point is what I see happening and increasing is that marketing owns valuations, not finance. Because if you think about it, it's just simply aggregation bias. The firm valuation is the value of the firm, but it stems from, you know, if you net out sort of assets that appreciate and depreciate, customers. So this is way too non-granular in the finance. And so we talk about this extensively in the core because of the importance of it. You know, and where is it going? Well, the problem in a lot of this is forecasting growth, retention, and marketing. But forecasting is a task that can be very well handled by experiments, machine learning, and sort of these long-term effects where we're all experts. So if you think about where this literature is going next, that's a really nice place. And you know, integrating, as I make these forecasts, integrating long-term metrics like attitudes and revenues, things that are owned by marketing. This is going to give us better forecasts, and therefore we're going to be able to do better valuations. Not just better valuations, but of course this all links back to marketing policy. So again, this is an important space. Another thing, now let's flip to the flip-flop of position of managers and academics. So when I was writing a paper on auctions in marketing, keyword auctions, I wrote to Hal Varian and said, you know, I'd really like some data to work on this project. He wrote back, no. Well, my first reaction is like he actually answered my email, and I clicked it. I still save it to this day because it's a Hal Varian email, and I'm a fanboy. But at any rate, his response was, I have a team of 30 PhDs. Why do I need you? That's an interesting question, right? And this is actually the norm in CS and common in economics. Athey and Luca have a very recent JEP paper on this. And the funny thing, it's not marketing that's being asked to move into these firms. And it gives me real pause about our relevance. You know, why don't they want us sort of thing? Have we lost the customer function to CS and econ? And it scares me a little bit. And so if you look, this is the number of tech companies, policy schools, business schools, et cetera, recruiting PhD in economics. One thing you note is that the econ departments aren't really growing, so they're all coming into business econ and marketing, but you also see a lot of them moving into tech companies. And you know, one really nice example of this is Justin Rao at HomeAway, and this segues nicely to data mining and machine learning and the notion of structured data and structured models. And so like, why is marketing losing its seat at the table in some sense? The way they do the ranking algorithms at HomeAway is simply they take machine learning, they use it to predict responses to this ranking. A couple of competing models will pop out, they'll roll a test. One test will win, that becomes data, or lose. That becomes data, and they just iterate back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And you know what? It works really well. Like, what's the role of marketing in this? I'll get back to that in a minute. But when I think about the futures of marketing, it gives cloud, it gives me some pause. But on the other side, so that's again, that's the discrimination type task side of it. But the non-structured data, I really do think there's some exciting stuff coming out of machine learning and AI. There's tons of progress with pictures and words and tagging video. And then the really interesting question is like, how do we bring this into CLV and customer prediction? Because there's really rich information there that can be useful for forecasting that. And as an example, I pulled this picture of Don off the internet and I submitted it to the cloud, the Google Cloud Vision site. I don't know if you've been there, and this is what it returned. First thing is, it reads emotions. This is Don's level of emotional maturity we're seeing here. And it makes me wonder, and with high confidence, is it conclusive proof that Don is a Vulcan? Perhaps. Well, I flipped to the labels part, and it says all forehead. So maybe he's not a Vulcan. Maybe he's just a bald android. And that would explain the emotional. Man, clothing, good. So his pronoun is Don, and he's not too fashionable. That I learned. And then finally, what really strikes me, interestingly enough, is how is this tagged? Right, so there's possibly metadata in the picture, but I don't think so. I downloaded a JPG. And there's a little information here, right? It's inverted blurred text. Orlando, 2017. Right, this was Don at the AMA conference in 2017, winning one of his numerous awards. So again, the potential in this space is absolutely remarkable. He won the AMA CBSIG Lifetime Achievement Award, and that's what's being picked up here, along with his forehead. Yeah, and then finally, what do I learn? That Don's not too racy. Maybe a different outfit, Don. But anyway, so integrating into CLV, one of my very favorite papers in this space is Oded's. You know, and when I think, this is Oded took all the data online that people talk about their cars, and it strips it and finds relationships. So what you see here is, here's the Corolla, here's the Civic, here's the Sentra, and these are the problems that people report. Clearly, this has to have some implication for firm equity, right, and customer satisfaction. And so there's pieces of the puzzles I think we still can put together. Okay, specialized databases. Here, creativity, not data, seems to be the scarcity factor. And when we think about what we can do with customer, it's actually getting pretty remarkable because we can deconstruct the customer. Every step, breath, heartbeat, neural firing from the ring alarm to dreams at night is captured, especially with watches and devices. Now, you might view this as a utopia or a dystopia. Case of dystopia, I don't know if you know this, your cars these days all have black boxes and they track wherever you've been. Well, this information has been subpoenaed and used in personal injury and divorce cases. Right? That's the dark side. On the other side, here is Apple Watch data, where we see evidence of an atrial fibrillation where life was actually saved because of an Apple Watch. The point being, we're collecting more information about customers and we can use it for good or bad. Okay, coming back to what's the role of marketing in all this when you have machine learning and test and learn. Well, if I just rely on machine learning, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm reminded of ancient Rome where we sacrifice a virgin at the winter solstice every year. If I'm going to run my machine learning algorithm on that, virgin slaying is highly predictive of days getting longer and crops coming back. Right? So we have to be really careful in the way we integrate and use these things. But also, a very interesting paper in 1998 is sort of this notion when we're doing experiments to get around this, is what experiment to run next. Do you remember this, Don? This is your... So Sunil said it was all regression, but Don slipped one on you there. This is an eigendecomposition paper. And Don's basic point is, I can understand where the uncertainty is greatest through an eigendecomposition. That directs me where I should put my experimental lens next. So given we're seeing this test and learn going on, I think there's super opportunities there. Okay, man versus machine. Again, the AI and Internet of Things, huge acceleration in human-machine interfaces from perception to decision-making. You know, how am I going to manage customer in this realm? Do I even market to people anymore? Do I market to machines? So real-time bidding in ad auctions is a really fine example of machines making decisions. So what does it mean to do marketing when machines are making the decisions? It's kind of an interesting thing about where we're going to go next there. Connecting the Internet of Things to the environment for customer management. So, one example of this is, let's suppose I have tags on all the clothes that I wear. It's RFID'd, it's in my closet, and I see something coming on the television. I just click on that item and I can see, does it go with my wardrobe? Which things would it fit in? You can see the potential for cross-selling, upselling, customer management, food delivery and watches. I can tell through somebody's blood sugar and where they are, whether they're hungry, and recommendations I can make. What decisions should we entrust to machines? So a really interesting question lately as machines get involved, do people even trust it? Do they use it? So there's a paper by Carey Morwich and some of his colleagues that shows that even though AI does a much better job of making recommendations in health context, people don't take it, they don't buy it. People think they're so exceptional that no machine could predict their particular case. So again, that's an area. And then finally, as it improves, will VR be better than life? Which is kind of an interesting question. This picture here, you see someone sleeping, was taken on a freeway from somebody in an auto-driven car, auto-driven Tesla. Okay, almost done with Don's predictions of the future and where I still think is emerging and developing. First, do global platforms, data, and algorithms bring consumers together or tear us apart? I think this is as relevant a question as when Don first posted it a number of years ago. Do recommendations lead to polarization? Well, that's an interesting problem in and of itself. Like, does marketing have a hand by relying on your individual past preferences to moving people away from homogenization and polarizing them? There's some work on this. It's just pretty nascent. Here's a paper that finds only partisans respond to email solicitations. So the idea was there's a leftover gift card from a Republican fundraiser, and the Democrats wouldn't buy the gift card, even though it was 50% off, and the Republicans would. Should brands take stands? And what I wonder is, like, why is marketing still silent on this? So you see these are not marketing journals here. And the reason I ask why we're so silent on it is we help create this problem through our targeting algorithms. So anyway, and then Ava's done some really neat work here on how is customer evaluation, I think Sunil touched this, effect in the socially connected world, and finding that customer evaluation, or the lift, the social multiplier, is 28%, and this gets to the point that Sunil and Don were raising is hard to predict for eBay. Okay, in terms of omnichannel promotion and distribution, managing acquisition and retention across multiple channels is becoming a problem in customer management as channels proliferate both on the promotion and purchase sides. So which functions to integrate and which to leave to the channel are an open question. Advertising today is becoming so difficult, it's impossible to figure out. So managers don't even understand how to advertise to their consumers. They can't even buy an ad. It's remarkable. And so there's some opportunities for us to lend some sense there. Online marketplaces, I think, are fascinating. Unfortunately, most of the work in marketing, although I like it, is about reputation mechanisms. Here's one for a horse head mask. It's day 87. The horses have accepted me as one of their own. I've grown to understand and respect their gentle ways. Now I question everything I thought I once knew and fear I'm no longer capable of following through with my primary objective. I know that those who sent me will not relent. They'll send others my places, but we will be ready. 1,000 people found it helpful, and it gets 5 stars. So much for the utility of recommendation mechanisms. Why do we spend so much time on recommendation mechanisms when we can't even help out retailers with pricing and assortment online? With all the data we collect from search and footsteps, that should, I think, be our primary concern in sort of managing customers when online marketplaces, especially now that we're approaching and surpassing 15% of all spend in the US in consumer markets is now online. Okay, rise in global markets, I'll let you down on this one. Don and I are both small-town domestic kids who still consume cheap domestic beer. It's one of the reasons I like going to conferences with Don. While the rest of you are out drinking fancy wines, Don and I will go buy some cheap local beers. And by the way, I couldn't find a picture of Don doing this, but I don't know if you've ever seen, he will literally smash a beer can against his head. I've seen him do it twice. The beer can does not stand a chance. The US is about a quarter of the world's GDP. I will note this much, but I'd hazard journal research data, on the other hand, is about a quarter non-domestic. So it does seem like a disconnect. Okay, final word, running out of time. So I did take the quiz. I was motivated by the Avengers this week. What superhero are you? And I channeled Dawn, and I plugged it, so I answered all the questions, and what showed up for Dawn, and I thought it was pretty appropriate. It was Tony Stark. And it says, you're Tony Stark, you're brilliant, outgoing, and a bit over the top, but you have a heart of gold. Your presence commands attention the minute you walk into a room, and I thought that described my advisor and longtime friend beautifully. So that's all I have to say.
Very insightful walk through the area of customer management. So without losing much time, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the panel, which Asim is running. Is Asim here? Oh, there he is.
You call them? Oh, okay. So we have Eva and Kusum and Fareena Sultan joining the panel. So please.
Thank you so much. We started off really great. Where's Jacob sitting? Hi, Jacob. That was awesome. What a great start to the morning. And as always, you learn so much from the people, every person in this room. It's just amazing. So thank you.
So we had a great set of talks in the morning. We can clearly conclude that the past was glorious, the present is scintillating, and the future is tantalizing, right? So basically, so we'll just continue the same discussion. We have a great panel here of 3 experts, all who have contributed to the area of customer management in many interesting ways. Let me do my job as the moderator and basically introduce the panelists, and then we'll have time for a few questions, which I have prepared in advance. So Eva is here. She is the Jakursky Family Associate Professor of Business Administration, Harvard Business School. We all know Eva very well. She has, very recently won the Paul Green Award for her work on retention futility.
Thank you.
She has been a finalist for the Paul Green Award multiple times. She has done excellent work in the area of customer management. Her expertise in CRM is deep, and particularly with an emphasis on customer retention. We have Kusum here. She is the Charles Jordan 1911 TU12. I don't know what TU12 is.
12.
Oh, top 12. Okay. Professor of Marketing at the Tech School of Business. Kusum is an expert in customer-based brand equity. She has also won many Best Paper awards from multiple marketing journals. And then we have Fareena here. Fareena Sultan, who is a professor of marketing at Northeastern University. She is a Columbia PhD. She also has, done extensive research in this area and have won multiple outstanding paper awards. She's an expert in digital marketing, particularly with an interest in mobile marketing, and she's also exploring AI. So I think with that, I will start with Fareena. She has, prepared a very short presentation, and I think basically she is interested in exploring how mobile marketing has evolved and what is its relationship to customer management. And then she will talk a little bit, I think, about AI and how AI impacts customer management.
Okay, thank you. Can I stand here?
Yeah, please. Whatever you want.
And is this the kicker?
Yeah, I think that's probably what.
So first of all, thanks to everybody who helped put this together. And thank you, Don, for making me obsessed about have an obsession about new products and innovations. I learned it from you, obviously. I also want to make a few comments about the picture of the office of Don. All of us who were doctoral students got to know that office very well. And in terms of technology and new things, in those days, since we didn't have computers, we were allowed to use the computer in his office. One of them had 2 floppy drives, if you remember them. And Sunil will vouch for this, that we had this A drive and B drive. And one day, the A drive was not working, so we decided to switch the floppy drives through OneDrive, and interesting things like that happened in there. Also, I didn't see a picture of Snoopy in there, which is who always used to be in the office, okay? So in terms of new products and innovation, et cetera, I think my interest started in the PhD program with Don, and Sunil stole some of my thunder in terms of how to do research. So when we had been taught in our research methodology sessions that we needed to first do a lit review and form hypotheses and then collect the data and then go and analyze it, et cetera, et cetera. So Don looked at me and said, forget the theory, okay? Go get the data. So I said, okay. He said, well, one way to do the literature review is to actually do a meta-analysis. So, of course, I had no idea what he was talking about, but I learned soon. And so doing a meta-analysis on diffusion of innovations made me really interested in innovations and technology. And so I continued to work in that field. So all of you are very attached to your mobile phones, and many of you are probably texting as I talk. And you know that if you try to take away the phones from your students in the class, they get very emotional. And in my classes, they will say things like, oh, it's like my best friend has, is lost, or my left arm or my right arm has been cut off, or if I lose my phone, it's like my friend has died, et cetera, et cetera. And all of us, sleep with it like not more than a foot away from us. So this notion of emotional attachment, it came through one of the lessons of observing students in around campus and seeing how attached they were. So I thought, okay, maybe mobile marketing is something we should study. So more than 3 in 10 would stop seeing their friends in person, according to one survey, rather than give up their smartphones. 55% would rather forego dining out for a whole year. And then 46% would be willing to give up a day per week rather than give up their smartphones. There were also many interesting things in here that I'm not putting up because of the polite company that we are in. So mobile marketing research. In the beginning, I started working with Adidas in 2004 for a case study, actually, that when Adidas was using mobile marketing for the European Cup soccer matches, and they were using this phrase called brand in the hand. So, which clearly sort of personifies the fact that this was an opportunity for marketers to start using this device because it's always with us 24/7. It's an opportunity to do branding wherever you are, whenever we would like to do that. We talked about the emotional attachment to mobile phones. So I thought there was a time that we should try to talk to industry, since industry was ahead of academia at that time in terms of studying mobile marketing. And Russ Weiner, unfortunately, did not believe me. And Russ, I'm going to call you out on this. I kept telling him, we need a conference at MSI to bring academics and industry people together. He said, that's just another medium. It's another device. It's not going anywhere. But finally, we were convinced, and we did have a conference on mobile marketing. And we all know how mobile has actually changed the way consumers behave and react to offers by marketers, and how marketers now have opportunities to get information that they never thought. For example, some recent papers that I've been working on have to do with the fact that when consumers check in using things like Foursquare and also at the same time tweet, then we are getting a profile of people at the location that they are. And the type of tweet that comes out from when you're in a restaurant versus when you're in the subway, et cetera, can help us do a lot more personalized and, at the moment, appropriate targeted marketing. Okay. Some trends we know about the fact that we are spending a lot of time on apps, and Sunil has been saying forever, it's apps, not ads. And the fact that we do multitasking, and the mobile is with us while we are watching TV. And now it seems that only 50% of the time when you're doing multitasking with only 2 devices is going to the television, okay? New trends, we know about AR, VR, IoT, et cetera. So the question is, how will ordinary consumers react with this new technology? And will there be a mechanism for us through apps on our mobile phones, since that's the thing we are so used to in terms of interacting with any kind of technology. We want an app which I can use with my phone because that's the device that's with me all the time, okay? So, but there's still a lot of research that needs to be done in mobile. We know that 5G and 5GE are coming. How will that impact us? And if we all recall Cambridge Analytica, we as marketers want to use data, collect data, lots of it. And then the question is privacy. No consumer that I know of has ever read any privacy agreement, but they are all concerned about privacy, and the Cambridge Analytica thing brought it into the masses, you know. Laws, regulations, and policies related to mobile marketing. What does GDPR do to you? Interesting thing is when we talk about policing corporations, et cetera, during the Zuckerberg hearings, if you recall, one unnamed senator that I will not name asked Mark Zuckerberg, how do you make money given that you don't charge customers? There's no price for the customer. So Zuckerberg thought that maybe the senator is trying to trick him, and he looked at him with a blank face, and then he smiled and he said, advertising. And I'm sure the senator had no clue what he was saying, okay? So if we are going to have people police Facebook and Facebook world, I think we will need them to get up to par with understanding, at least at a minimal level, how our company is making money out of our data, okay? There's the antitrust issues coming up with Facebook, which wants to merge Messenger, WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook. So from the Facebook's perspective, that's great. You have the technical infrastructure of these 4 platforms all connected. But from the consumer's perspective, a lot of people who use WhatsApp for text messaging, especially overseas video chat, et cetera, with family, those are private conversations that they do not want it to be at the same platform linked with Messenger, et cetera. AI, thankfully, Dawn had told us long time ago that AI is going to be coming here. And McKinsey in 2017 was saying, that's the next digital frontier. So I'm not going to give any definitions on this because there are multiple definitions of AI and machine learning, but it's clear that there's a lot of interest from marketers in terms of artificial intelligence being used for personalization, being used for personalized offers, content creation, service encounters. Chatbots are all around, the robots in service. Recently, I think Walmart has been using robots in grocery aisles, and one customer, when asked what you think about that, said, it blocks the aisle, so, okay, all right. So in terms of future, where are we going with this customer value? How will it be redefined in this AI world? Is CLV going to remain the same if a machine creates it and machine is asked to define CLV versus humans? What is going to be the customer response to interacting with machines like this? Trust and privacy issues, who is keeping the data, where is it going? And we as a society, we're going to make ourselves useless if machines become intelligent. How do we become robot-proof, okay? Donna is here, and there's an upcoming conference, the TNP conference, and the JM special issue, and hopefully that will help clear some of the issues that are raised, okay? All right, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Fareena. Sure, I know. I'm keeping track. According to this watch, I have 14 minutes. So.
We'll go fast,
Yeah.
don't worry.
So I think I'll, give the opportunity now for Kusum to sort of talk about customer-based equity. Kusum has, thought about this thing deeply and is, going to enlighten us.
Oh dear. If you say so. Don't hold your breath, people.
You better do now.
I know. So actually, instead of waxing on about customer-based equity, I'm actually just going to piggyback on some of the things we heard, the themes we heard from the 3 speakers before us. And let me just make one point that I think is important, and then pass it on to Eva, and then if we have time, we can come back. So Sunil, you said, you and Don, when you re-engaged MBA students in marketing, it was about the two major intangible assets that aren't on the balance sheet: customers and brands. Obviously completely right. I just want to remind us that customers are of two types. There are the end consumers who are our customers, and there are our distribution channel members who are also our customers. And if we're going to think about customer and brand equity as being the two intangible assets, then we should never forget that within customers, we need to cover both those kinds of customers. Otherwise, maybe it's more important for us to recognize that there are three major intangible assets. It's your distribution channels, your consumers, your customers, and your brands. So not surprisingly, a lot of the work, almost all of the work on customer management has been done on the end consumers. Started with the Sears catalog. That's where we have our data. That's where we work directly with end consumers. And hey, when you're a direct marketing company, there's no concept of distribution channels. So it's not particularly important for you to think about your distribution channels. But for the rest of the world of marketing, where companies, for the most part, work through distribution channel members, I think that's an important thing. There's been a lot of good work by many of the people sitting in this room, some right here in front of me, who've written extensively about how brand equity and customer equity interact. And I would just throw out as a space for us to work in how brand equity, customer equity, and distribution channel equity work together. And that's not an easy way to think about things. So we might think about the equity of our distribution channel as sort of being made up of the equity of the customers who shop those channels. And that's one aspect of it. It's important to think about how important and valuable the customers are that come through us through each channel. But if you think about the equity of Amazon today, right? Amazon, by any measure, is a highly valued company. And it builds its valuation through its customer equity. But if you're a brand, it's not a no-brainer at all whether selling through Amazon is going to actually help your brand equity, your valuation in total, depending upon what kind of brand you sell. It could actually hurt you. And that's the reason why many brands still, despite the growth of Amazon, are thinking very hard about whether they should sell through Amazon or not. So let me leave it at that so I don't use up too much time. If we have more time, I'll come back again. Thank you.
And now,
So Eva, I think, is going
Yeah,
to concentrate on.
exactly what I'm gonna do now. So we're gonna continue improvising, I guess, in this panel. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna actually share my reflections now on seeing the speakers and seeing how the conversation's been evolving, and I'm gonna give you my thoughts on those as we actually planned. Yeah, so here's my reflections, given my view of the field and what I've seen today. And I agree a lot with what Carl said, and actually many things with some kind of surprise now. So I'm gonna put it in the way I was thinking about that. And my reflection is really much about like AI, machine learning, whatever we're gonna call it, on customer management. And I'm gonna kind of stick to the framework that Sunil described, which is the way I generally think about it, is like we think about these customers. I'm ignoring the distribution channels and everything I'm gonna say right now, but so we think about the customers that we acquire them, we retain them and develop them. And I think there's been huge improvement in how we measure all that, thanks to methods, machine learning and data. Both machines collecting the data and machines estimating the data. And we have learned a great deal of prediction. And we have been moving that engine, and now firms, all of them have the column for LTV, CLV, whatever it is. And actually all of them are, not all of them, but many of them are quite good at actually getting at that value. What I think we have been lacking more, back to that framework, or even the 2x2 matrix, I think we know how to put people in buckets, but machine learning hasn't helped us yet to move people to the buckets we want to move them to. And the way I think about AI or machine learning is one is prediction estimation, like we figure out the betas and the alphas, and the other one is these machines are interacting with consumers, and they can actually help us moving these people to this box. So, I mean, my view on the estimation, prediction, and so on, we are doing a lot of work on that, and we are using good methodologies to figure out what people want and what people might actually respond to. Now, what I think we should be thinking more, back to Carl's point, is on, we now have, for example, I mean, there are many companies who claim to increase retention because of their chatbots. So the better my robot is at talking to my customers, increase retention. Okay, have we thought about how to help those bots to be better at keeping those customers? So the CS people will know how to make them talk better, understand English or Spanish or whatnot. I think our role would be, can we actually help them being better customer managers? So can we actually bring insights, behavioral insights to these robots or to whoever actually increase the value of customers? This is kind of the way I have put together these things in my head. I don't know if we're planning to have questions. We can also change that plan. So yeah, thank you, Asim.
In terms of customer management and CLV, one of the issues is, you can train the machine. So are we going to be learning from them, or are they going to be learning from us? Or is there going to be a two-way knowledge generation, and even our metrics are going to evolve? Because, maybe I have one way of measuring CLV, and the machine, because it has so much data, has come up with this information that, this is not the right way to think. So is this a two-way dialogue, or is this, what's the directionality?
Is this working? Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm saying, my hope is that we actually, from the research community, we actually help these two lines. I think we're very good at using machines to get the answer we want to figure out. We're good at, I mean, there's a lot of very good empirical people just here using machinery to get the answer. But and we are letting others to program those machines to do whatever they tell them to do. I think it's our role to tell these machines how to be better managers. If they're going to start making decisions, I think we should ourselves give behavioral true insights, because at the end of the day, we deal with consumers, distributors, whatever it is. So I think I hope, or hope a dialogue.
So going back to Kusum and her, mentioning of digital distribution channels, Kusum, can you speak a little bit about how digital distribution has changed the concept of customer loyalty, and whether it is even a relevant concept in this particular era?
So yeah, customer loyalty, retention is obviously an ultimate part, the main backbone of customer management. And in the last few years, we've heard several people, in fact, I think Itamar Simonson has a book basically making the point that loyalty is dead. Basically, consumer loyalty is dead. We live in the world of digital and mobile, where every search is a click away. Sounds trite, cliched, but it's true. And when search is costless, what does that mean for loyalty? And I guess I would say far from it. Not only is loyalty well and alive, I think it's going to be even stronger and more important in the future than in the past. It is certainly much easier for us to lose our customers with one bad episode or event, but ultimately we've had so much research in the last decade that says consumers are just as sticky online as they are offline. Amazon Prime makes us stickier than ever to buying things on Amazon. And the good thing is, not only is loyalty alive and well, whether it's loyalty to the brand or to the retailer, but it's actually easier to measure online. In the world of physical retail, really the only way we could measure true loyalty we could ask people about their attitudes, we still do. We could observe their retention, which could be habit and not loyalty. But the only way we really could actually measure loyalty was when things got out of stock, and we observed what the consumer did when their favorite brand was not in stock in the store. Well, today the consumer doesn't even really need to go to a store unless they know their brand is going to be available there. Search begins at home. Search begins on the mobile phone. But we can observe what consumers are searching for online, where they are searching. Are they searching for a brand or a retailer or a category? And that tells us a whole lot about their loyalty and how we can foster that and whether we need to worry. So we'll just stop that there.
Thank you, Kusum. So there is time for just one question from the audience if anybody is interested in. So, yeah.
Okay. This isn't a question, but I just want to reinforce Kusum's point about the distributor as part of the customer equity equation. There was a paper I worked on with Florian and Don and Mark Heitman. And we had a variable in there that we weren't quite sure what it was, but Don ended up naming it market presence. Basically, it was the dealer network that automobile companies had. And we found a direct link between market presence, or essentially your equity with your distributors, and brand equity defined from the customer mindset, as well as customer equity defined in terms of acquisition, retention of customers. So I really just, your comments really resonated with me and brought me back to a very fond experience working with Don. But again, I think it is a big issue, and I think it's really interesting that you brought it up. So thank you for doing so.
Thank you, Scott. I wanted to ask Don if he had anything to add to this topic, and before we break for coffee.
That he would never say.
The answer is I probably don't have anything worthwhile to add, but I now feel compelled to speak because I always do what Gita tells me to do. So two quick comments. The customer management stuff, I think, still suffers from, we know a lot about what they do with us, but not a lot about what they do with other people. So the whole area of competition is underplayed. And I think the more existential question, and this is actually related to what some people in national defense are worried about, if the system goes down and we've given over the ability to make customer decisions, we've given up our autonomy, what happens then?
Yeah.
On that hopeful note, we'll take a coffee break.